I find this video funny how it's the first wave of my survival vids for wave 4 because a subscriber a long time ago asked me this question. Could Drogon survive in Monster Hunter? And I simply said, no, not really. But that's when I really didn't look at Drogon the way I do now. I see him as a powerhouse. He's easily a city level character, easily a city buster. And he actually has a fairly good chance in Monster Hunter. Now, we're going to look at everything, as we usually do. Food, water, shelter, survival, and then environmental compatibility. Now, the last one is basically if Drogon can adapt to become much more powerful within the verse. And if he can't, well, that kind of limits his possibilities. Another thing is we won't be including the Hoarfrost Reach or the Elder's Recess as it's way too overwhelming for Drogon. So we'll keep it at the basic environments, okay? Rotten Vale, Ancient Forest, Coral Highlands, and the Wildspire Waste. So let's begin here. And we're going to start off with the Ancient Forest. Now, this one actually benefits Drogon greatly, as long as he doesn't go too high in the sky to provoke a Rathalos attacking. There's plenty of places for water and shelter, so Drogon immediately and obviously has that covered. However, what about food? What about, things he could eat? Now, in Game of Thrones, we know the dragons are carnivores, but do they have a certain fondness for a certain prey item, right? So we know that in Game of Thrones, we've seen Drogon pretty much eat nothing but sheep. It's I think it's pretty prevalent for dragons to pretty much eat nothing but sheep on a regular, and they eat small creatures, or at least creatures they know they can easily handle. However, we do know that Balerion the Black Dread was able to eat mammoths, sometimes in a single whole gulp, but we do know that this does mean they can take down substantial prey item as big as mammoths. So it's not out of the ordinary to say these dragons' diets are flexible. We also know that they will eat people in Game of Thrones. So with that being said here, Drogon's diet may consist of anything he can get his hands on. And let's not forget, by the end of these season 7, or the last season of Game of Thrones, he's easily big enough. He's big enough to pretty much fondle buildings, or at least stand over castles and stuff. So Drogon being capable of eating things like Aptonoth, Jagras, and Kestodon is very, very simple and very easy. I do think he will stick to the darker parts of the forest, as he would be able to camouflage better, and especially at nighttime. And he would basically become a nighttime creature, and I do think some of the other creatures would easily fit into that category. I do think the Jagras and Great Jagras are nothing more than prey to him. However, this does lead to, again, competition eventually, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So I do think he would eat creatures that he would be able to easily take down, and after analyzing how they work, because again, Drogon is a very perceptive dragon, he would be able to, easily just dive bomb and crash on top of them, and then just start eating them, okay? Because Drogon and the other dragons from Game of Thrones are capable of using this tactic where they're able to swoop around even each other and get pretty much handles on their necks here. So what makes this important is this means Pookie is likely going to be a victim. Probably a much more repetitive victim than the Great Jagras, as Pookies do like to live in the more darker, more camouflaged parts of the forest to avoid predators, and Drogon would likely eat them. However, Drogon needs to be wary. Monsters that are more nomadic in nature, like Zinogre, Devil Joe, Tigerex, Glavenus, are still capable of showing up in these kind of parts of forest to look for prey, if not look for territory. Drogon could likely fend them off a little bit, but he would have to use his fire breath right off the bat and pretty much immediately, okay? He would basically have to pretty much use his fire breath and the explosive force behind it to basically knock them back and then get away. Now, the main problem I do think he will have is probably Anjanath's competition. And the thing is, Anjanath is a super predator, in my opinion. Anjanath is capable of preying upon Great Jagras, Tobi Kadachi, if he can get it, and pretty much any other creature he'll get his hands on. It doesn't matter to him. Even in the Wildspire Waste, it tries to, it'll eat Geratodus and Baroth while trying to predate a Diablos. It's bold. It's that bold. Now, Nargacuja will probably present more trouble at nighttime than daytime, considering Drogon will probably be a nighttime predator due to his camouflage, and the same with Nargacuja, it's very possible they might bump into each other, likely leading to a roaring match, and if neither one backs down, then that could lead into Drogon getting ripped apart and ripped to shreds. Now, the only thing about Drogon in this here is that he has many ways to escape here. He's easily much more maneuverable than a lot of the creatures here. He has great aerial, acrobatics, and he should be at least supersonic to hypersonic in speeds, at least around Mach 5, if you will. This comes from him being able to cross distances that would take some creatures hours, but he can turn it into at least like 30, if not 20 minutes. However, this does not make him faster than a Rathalos. Rathaloses are just massively faster, especially, Rathalos, Legiana, Astalos, characters of that caliber. They're just massively faster. You could even say lightning speed, if you will, due to how aerial mobility works and how they function in their verse. This means that he would just have to watch out for Rathalos. However, I think the environment he would benefit the most is the Wildspire Waste, with very few limited flyers, and the only flyer there being Betelgeuse, who he's faster than. And you could say Rathian and Nightshade Palumo, but he's easily going to be able to, he's not going to bother Rathian. Rathian's not going to bother him, and Nightshade Palumo is not even in his tier bracket now. And the only monster you have to look out for is Diabolus. However, I think Drogon can get a lot more from this environment than the Ancient Forest. The constant battling and the constant fight for dominance is leaving injured and wounded creatures here, especially with Diabolus having a normal mortality rate of their own kind, and other creatures like Baroth who get too close to their nests. I do think Drogon could definitely make it out okay, much more in the Wildspire Waste. More than the Ancient Forest. However, I do think this is where Drogon would have to adapt here. And hear me out, right? I think he would eat the corpse of a Savage Deviljho. Now, hear me out. Let me cook. Let me cook real quick, right? Savage Deviljhos get into fights that they probably know good well they can't win. It's actually known in the World Art Book that Glavenuses would kill a Deviljho, like in a turf war. Like, they are literally known to slice off the heads of Deviljhos. And I don't think Savage Deviljho is indifferent, just stronger. And I do think that Savage Deviljho also has a time limit. It's also confirmed that Savage Deviljho will eventually drop dead due to the overabundance of dragon energy. And I do think that Drogon would eventually see this. I do think a Savage Deviljho dropping dead eventually in the Wildspire Waste, with Drogon potentially smelling it out, or if not following it very carefully, would eventually wait for the Deviljho to drop and then would eat the corpse. And I do think that this is a possibility. You might say, no, he wouldn't be able to do that. The Deviljho would sniff him out. And here's the thing, right? Even if the Deviljho sniffs him out, it wouldn't be able to get to him. Drogon would basically hang back and wait kind of like a vulture. It wouldn't be too close and it wouldn't be too far. He would literally wait for either a hunter to kill it or another monster to kill it. Okay? Another monster, or basically wait for Deviljho to pretty much run its course. And honestly, I do think this is how Ebony Odogaron came to be. Savage Deviljho likely picked a fight with an Elder Dragon it couldn't really beat, something like Runer Nergigante or, a regular Nergigante, and then once killed by that, Elder Dragon, Odogaron came in, ate the corpse, would eat the dragon sack, and then become Ebony Odogaron. This then will go into the subspecies, and then yada yada. I do think the same thing would happen for Drogon. And especially if Ebony Odogaron, or at least any Odogaron, is not in the area, it would be able to eat the corpse, and this would eventually lead it to eating the dragon sack. Now, we know Drogon eats everything to the bone, or at least the dragons eat everything to the bone, meaning they leave no organs behind. This includes the dragon element organ. And I do think he would be somewhat of an unknown, if you will. I know you guys get my point, right? The unknown from Monster Hunter Frontier. I think that's what happened. He would eat the dragon sack and eventually had to adjust to the element being within him. He would have to use it in different ways. Maybe, and considering the fact that Savage Dewajo has 2 times the dragon element, this would also lead to Drogon having 2 times the dragon element. And with that being said here, I think it would boost his capabilities far beyond the norm. If we had to give him a set tier, right? I do think he would be in the same bracket or in the same category as an Azor Rathos. As a matter of fact, let's say he gets the same armor, the same armor level, the same bulk, mass, and fire breath of an Azor Rathos, except he has dragon energy, right? Drogon's life now becomes much easier in Monster Hunter, in the new world, than it really should have. You know, Drogon no longer being a scavenger, he can hunt, he can fight, he can now fight against other monsters that would, normally pose a threat to him. I do think Drogon's main competition would probably be a Nargacuja. The reason why is I think Drogon would stick to his nightly habits and prey on creatures at nighttime. This means creatures like the Jaggeris or Tobi Kadachi, creatures of that magnitude. I do think that if Drogon was to ever make his way into a Garrotten Vale, he would probably stick to... I do think he would probably stick to areas where he would basically be able to get a reasonable source of scavenging, reasonable ways, reasonable, areas of scavenging, as to not pick fights he knows he wouldn't try to. However, I do think Drogon does have easier experiences. As for spreading his genes, I don't know if the dragons in Game of Thrones reproduce both sexually and asexually, but let's say they reproduce both ways, right? Let's say that if Drogon is able to reproduce asexually, if that happens, he's able to spread his genes across the new world, and these dragons, reproducing asexually, kind of like Nergigante being a simple clone of the original. This allows them to pretty much adapt, have the same dragon element, have the same explosive fire, probably amplified by the dragon element, and now you could probably have them with species dimorphism, and then you could have the dragons kind of just, adapt in different environments. However, I do think Drogon, being smart enough and being one of the smarter monsters there, possibly almost Elder Dragon level when it comes to intelligence, would stay away from pretty much monsters he knows are just way too high for him. Things like Nergigante, Behemoth, Kushala Daora, Teostra, and Lunastra, he would definitely stay away from them. But I think overall, Drogon can have a very suitable life here in Monster Hunter. He can. But this is only if he keeps everything, on the down low. Any moment he tries to usurp or he gets too aggressive and tries to fight another monster that's way above his tier bracket, he's going to die. Alright? So Drogon gets a 50-50 for survival rating here. But hey, let me know what you guys think down below. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share with your friends. This is Legendary Grimlock, and I'll see you guys later for the next survival video. Peace.